Really? What are you doing with the extras?
Good evening, board members and residents. I would like to call to order our regular board meeting and public hearing for Monday, March 24th, 2014. Will everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Witt, will you please take the roll call?
Yes, Mr. Brado,
Here.
Mr. Capral,
Here.
Mr. Swakowski.
Here.
Mr. Tominello is running a few minutes late. Mr. York,
Here.
Mr. Witt here, Mr. Verkest.
Here. Thank you. Next on our agenda is the approval of the consent agenda, including the approval of the regular board meeting minutes of March 10, 2014, approval of the bills in the amount of $643,475.17, and approval of the February 2014 revenue and expenditure report. Item 4 of the consent agenda has asked to be removed at this time.
Make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
All right, we've got a motion by Mr. York,
Support.
support by Mr. Swakowski to approve the consent agenda. Discussion, board members. Hearing none and seeing no public comment, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. Next on our agenda is the approval of the regular agenda. I don't believe there were any proposed revisions or changes to the agenda. If not, I'd be looking for a motion to approve the agenda as printed.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Support.
Got a motion by Mr. Swakowski with support by Mr. York to approve the agenda as presented. Discussion, board members. Hearing none and seeing no public comment, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. Next on the agenda, announcements. Board members, we've got a few announcements. Our Harrison Township Public Library is hosting Trash to Garden Treasures this Wednesday, March 26th at 7 p.m. Feel free to come by, learn some creative tips on how to repurpose household items into beautiful garden art pieces. The presentation is free, refreshments will be served, and pre-registration is required. To register for any library event, please call the library 586-329-1261, or you can stop in the library and sign up. Any events library events that involve children require that the children are accompanied by an adult. The Let's Move Festival of Races will be held starting in downtown Mount Clemens on Saturday, April 26th. There will be a half marathon run and walk, a half marathon relay, a 5K run and walk, a 1 mile river walk, and a last mile kids run. This half marathon does run through portions of Harrison Township, and as a result, early Saturday morning there will be some partial road closures throughout Harrison Township. The route and information is available on the township's website and also on the race website, www.letsmovefestival.com. And of course, for information on these or any events in the township, you can call the supervisor's office, 586-466-1445, or visit the township website, harrison-township.org. Any other announcements? All right. Hearing none, we'll move on to item B. Mr. Witt?
The last meeting, the board approved for our engineer, Wade Trim, to prepare a application for a Michigan Natural Resource Trust Fund grant. In order to submit that application, we must conduct a public hearing on the application. So at this time, I guess I'd be making a motion to open the public hearing for the proposed Harrison Township Nature Trail at 7:08 p.m.
All right, we've got a motion by Mr. Witt. Is there support?
Support.
Support by Mr. Capral to open the public hearing. Is that a roll call vote?
Yes.
Is there discussion, board members? Hearing none and seeing no public comment, Mr. Witt, will you please take the roll call?
Yes. Mr. Witt? Yes. Mr. Capral?
Yes.
Mr. Brado?
Yes.
Mr. Swakowski?
Yes.
Mr. Tominello?
Yes.
Mr. York?
Yes.
Mr. Verkest?
Yes. All right.
Since the last meeting, our engineer has been able to go through and sort of flesh out the plan. At this time, I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Newmer and Mr. Young, who put the plan together, just sort of give a brief overview now that it's sort of been put together.
Thank you very much. That's correct. We initially started a couple of weeks ago with the concept of an idea. We had the cost in mind, and we had the nature trail obviously in mind, trying to allow users, particularly of the existing trail, to be able to divert and enjoy the property, experience the wetlands on the property. And so what we've done is we have a graphic, a conceptual design or layout of that proposed nature trail. We're showing it as a combination of different surfaces, including asphalt and boardwalk. We're proposing to extend through an existing wetland on the site, again, to allow people to experience that. We also have shown on there some trail amenities, including an overlook structure, a couple bench nodes, trash receptacles, and also we're proposing to install some interpretive signage along the trail that would educate people about or help people identify different features of the site, whether it's about wetlands or potentially about invasive species and some other natural amenities on the site. We have provided to you the cost estimates for the project that gives a little bit more detail as well. But I do want to let you know that this is a grant application at this point. It's conceptual in nature. And if you would receive the grant award, the final site actual alignment would be dependent, of course, on a site survey, of course. And that some minor deviations here and there are certainly allowable as part of the grant. With that, I'll open it up to any questions that you might have of me or of Dave.
Maybe just add a couple comments that we had, questions that we heard at the board meeting when we presented this initially. There was a question about security or safety along the trail, and we are showing a call box, an emergency call box that will be placed along the trail somewhere. That facility is it's solar powered, so we get some credit in our application for submitting that because it's green infrastructure. So that helps us to score higher on our application, as well as to provide for safety amenities along the trail. We would have to find a location when we go to actually design it that would have access to solar power. So we can't put it under a bunch of shade trees, but we'll find a good spot to put it out there with the project. One of the other questions that was asked at the last meeting was what kind of materials we'd be using for the boardwalk, in particular if we're using wood or if we're using like a Trex plastic laminated type wood material. Our initial cost estimate looked at that Trex material is about 3 to 4 times more expensive than the boardwalk made out or constructed out of wood. When we get to the actual design of the project, once you get the grant, we'll take a look at that in a little more detail, do a life cycle cost analysis. But at this point, with it being 3 to 4 times more expensive, we might be better off to just go with the regular wood. But that's a determination, like I said, that we'll make at the engineering phase when we do the life cycle cost. So just want to add those couple things because those were questions from the last meeting.
And then I know one of the other questions was as far as like hours and, and adding on to that safety. We had talked about, it being a sign that it's closed at night and even the possibility of putting some sort of gate on there. That's done in a couple other similar venues, so.
Yeah, and certainly this is conceptual at this point. If there's a vista or a feature as this path meanders, and during that, if we're fortunate enough to get the grant and proceed with the project, the path might be altered. I know one of the things that was discussed was the potential for access to the large bur oak tree that's on the property, and that could be, say for example, a feature that would be intentionally added or perhaps avoided so as to not to disturb the tree or whatever. It could be a little side path. So some of those details might be worked out if we are fortunate enough to be chosen for the grant and go further in the process. True? Okay. All right. I know that we received several letters of support on the project. I did inquire at the county level if there was an opportunity for funding, and they said that, well, this is a project they would support. They do have a master plan. This really is not a part of their master plan, and as such, they didn't see, an avenue for funding this project at a county level. Any more questions from the board?
I guess I'll ask, it was brought up to me, I normally don't go down there very much, but why do we need to have our own nature trail when just down the road a little bit at the park that they have, I guess they have a nice nature trail down there. I don't know, I guess I'm more worried about the $100,000 on a tight budget than the need versus dollars. I mean, I look out at our parking lot out here that's needed to be replaced since I've been on this board, 2004. I know that we at one point had some type of plans. I think, Dave, you might have done a mock-up for us on the parking lot out there.
Yeah, we've done some repairs, but, right, no replacement.
Yeah, I mean, parking lot really needs,
Mhm.
do we need a nature trail or do we need a parking lot? Do we need, especially since we have facilities just another mile away that we don't have to pay for, we don't have to maintain, we don't have to do anything.
Well, that's a valid point, but if the case is that we're not gonna do anything with the 155 acre property that the board, I'm pretty sure you were on it at the time, bought this, it's sitting there with, we either do something with it or it just sits there and you can drive by and look at it. But I think it's a really unique parcel in the state to be a wooded wetland. They're exceptionally rare. It's much different than what they have at the beach. And I think we have an opportunity here to apply for the grant. There's a chance we don't get it and this goes nowhere, but I think we'd be foolish to not try and get some matching dollars to help us enhance what we already own,
And let me say for the record, I've never been on the nature trail at the beach. So,
Well, and their most recent path that's really been accepted and kind of celebrated, I guess not accepted, but generate a lot of buzz and interest is predominantly a marshland path. And I know that during discussions on this parcel, we've heard about how it is in fact kind of a unique parcel to be. As Mr. Witt said, truly wetlands, but wooded. Most of those areas, a lot of those areas have been cleared, and it is somewhat rare. I think it would be a real gem if we could get folks to see some interest and kind of explore and enter that. Get the ball rolling on that 155 acres and its utilization.
just for the record, I voted no on buying the property in the first place because I thought
Sure.
But here we are owning it.
Yeah.
we owned it. I mean, we owned it. I understand. I just thought we could have gotten it a lot cheaper, but
Sure.
that's for another day.
Yeah.
Just real quick, I'm not very good at like scale. What is that total length? What about 600? What about 400 feet, somewhere in there proposed roughly?
It's actually in the just under 2,000
Okay.
linear feet, 1,900 and change.
Yep. Looks like 1950.
I didn't,
Yeah.
I'm not looking at all this.
1966 at the estimate. And of course, I mean, at this point, this concept is just that, it's an estimate. But, so about 2,000 feet.
I do understand though that there's, Harrison Township is one of the premier places for BMX dirt biking back on their 155 acres. According to the message boards anyways. Apparently they have a BMX track back there.
I think one of the, one of the functions of this too was to provide access to the residents, not only to water and the nature preserve in the township. I mean, I know we've all talked about what we can do to provide more access to water to the residents in outlying communities, as well as this nature preserve, or this 155 acres. I think that would also provide more access to residents. And what does the beach say? They get a million cars a year? Metro Beach gets 1 million cars a year. So we know that a lot of people are going into the beach, but there's also a lot of people using that bike trail. Thousands, and I mean, I don't know how many people. It's got to be tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands.
I was out on
have
it
no
on
idea.
Saturday when it was 20 degrees, and I saw no fewer than 50 people out there. So.
Well, in summertime, I'm talking about.
But I'm just
Yeah.
saying, even in the middle of winter.
Right, yeah, year round.
Well, spring now, I guess, but
Yeah.
there's still snow on the ground, so.
And for the record, I walk the nature trail at the beach a lot. So, and there's it's pretty well traveled. So, I think this would be useful. I mean, it's
Mr. Supervisor, what line item, if in fact this grant goes through, what line item would our share come from?
I don't know that it's been identified, but at this point, I don't think we have dollars budgeted for this. This would have to come from the general fund.
Okay, so general fund is the answer
Yeah.
at this point?
Yeah, I don't know of another funding source at this point.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you very much.
We would receive funding next year if approved, so during the budget process, we'll have a better idea and
Okay.
we can make an allocation at that point.
Thank you.
I know this is a public hearing. We've heard from the engineer. We've heard some board comment. If there's no objection, I'd like to open up the floor for public comment.
Bill Serville, resident and also chairman of the Economic Development Corporation of Harrison Township. Mr. Supervisor, just last week I talked to you about the possibility of putting a road through. You know the details I was talking about, basically paralleling that drain to alleviate all the problems that there are on Jefferson. As proposed, we'd have to rip out a good portion of this to do that road. So that's my first objection. But I don't know where to start. First off, I can see a problem with security here. And the first time someone has a problem on that path, the sheriff department's going to tell us that they don't have enough deputies to patrol this path, and we're going to have to add more deputies if we want that secured. All right, that's problem number one. Problem number two is this is really expensive. I think the engineer can answer this for you, but I believe this is substantially more expensive than it costs to pave a square foot of road. I did some calculations here. It's approximately $25 a square foot, not a running foot. That comes out to $200 a running foot to put in an 8-foot wide path. I believe that is too expensive for the benefit. The cost ratio benefit just isn't there. The Economic Development Corporation has not done anything or brought anything forward on this because the economy's been so bad. It's just turning around. Some of you may remember back when there was a master plan, Mr. Maher had a meeting in this very room some years ago, and there was a proposal from one of the businesses to buy some land in this parcel to put a hotel water park there. That is a destination type of business, which is about the only thing that we can have out there because there's not enough through traffic to justify a business that tries to catch people going past the road. But it is a good functioning thing to have out there, and there's a problem with the infrastructure. Jefferson cannot be widened, practically speaking, for any reasonable amount of money because of all of the construction on both sides of it. But if you had this road going in from Metro Parkway to Jefferson, that would give access to this area. There's 18 acres of highlands just to the west of this, or northeast. The person that brought this forward, it was actually Mr. Linsky brought it forward, but it was one of the restaurants here was interested in it. They asked for 25 acres, but there's actually 18 acres that is not any kind of wetlands. It's highlands. It's out of the floodplain, the whole 18 acres, and it's adjacent to that is a place where it could be started. Mr. Ferlini talked about developing part of this to secure this. Right now, my understanding is there's kids that go back in there right now. God only knows what they're doing back there. There is unauthorized use of it with ATVs. I believe that the time is right, possibly, that things are getting better. The time is right to at least develop the perimeter of it with some kind of a development that would secure it, much more than a fence would. There was talk just at the last meeting that Vandy already is there, and there's a possibility of putting houses on the other side. I'm assuming Vandy already has utilities, so it wouldn't be that expensive to develop lots on the other side of Vandy. That would secure that part of the, stop access to our 155 acres that way, and possibly do something on Jefferson. But there's a lot of things that can be done. Patience is a virtue. If we aren't going to develop it, then let's sell it to the Nature Conservancy or something. But I believe part of it can be developed and recover our cost. But spending $400,000, don't look at $100,000. This is still taxpayer money. It's $400,000. And we always have overruns. It'll probably be more than that. And we'll probably have to eat the overruns because I believe the grant is for $300,000. If it costs $450,000, then our cost is $150,000, which won't be a 25%. That'd be a 50% match if I'm doing my math right. I think you better rethink this. Thank you.
Thank you.
William Bardell. I think this is a terrific idea. I think putting a nature trail in this and not pillaging this land, I think is a terrific idea. This gem right here, with the recreation, since we are a recreation area, I think we need to lead by example, and I think this is a great example. I understand it's a 25% match, and you can best believe if we get a 50% match from Macomb County, Mark Hackle will have his name on this, so I'm not really excited about that. So I think this should stay for Harrison Township, for the people of Harrison Township, and I think we can all enjoy it with our bikes and so forth and walking. I just have one question. I was wondering, on this, can we drive our mountain bikes on this or rollerblades, or is that off limits on the certain parts of the trail? I don't know if that's a question, or we can have that, talk about that later.
We can ask that.
Also, as far as security goes, I don't know if anybody goes on a bike path, jogs on a bike path, or works out on a bike path, takes their bike on a bike path, so forth. The more people you got on this bike path, the more people you got watching, more eyes, more ears, more safety. Then if you got some 15-year-olds back there smoking cigarettes, you can hit 911 on your cell phone, which has a tracking device, and the Macomb County boys will be in there in a second, 12 minutes. That's how long they take here in Harrison Township. But I think it's a great idea. We're a recreation township. I say we lead by example, and we get a 25% match. I think that's good. But like I said, if we wait to try to get 50% match, you're going to have Mark Hackle's name on it. And this is Harrison Township, and I think this is a great idea. We lead by example. We're a recreational area. And as far as the structure with the, we could go half and half, maybe use a composite for your supports, for your foundation, and use your treated wood for your slats. Thanks a lot. I think it's a great idea. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other public comment, we'll close the floor for public comment and move back to board comment. A couple of points made. I guess I misunderstood one of the residents' proposal. I did not perceive that this path was going through the same area that the road that he proposed was going, so I'll have to go back and take a look at that plan, but I guess I saw that different. There was a mention about security on the path. We currently have quite a bit of path throughout the township, some of which runs along Metro Parkway, some which goes through neighborhoods. We've got a pretty significant stretch that runs along the spillway, and it's a pretty rural path. At this point, I'm not aware of significant security issues with their current pathways that we have. I don't know if Mr. Newmer, if you can speak to paving a road versus paving a path like this, which is more expensive? I guess I have a guess, but no sense in guessing when we're fortunate to have the engineer here.
Sure. The cost that we're seeing with the path here on a per foot basis probably is somewhat higher than paving a road because of the boardwalk component. We're looking at about $10 a square foot for paving and $35 to $40 a square foot for the boardwalk component because of, not only because of the boardwalk structure that has to be built, but also because of the pilings that have to be driven to support it.
Gotcha.
So when you get that combination of those two together, it can be more than a paved road.
And again, this being a concept, what you've done is you've kind of proposed a mixture of asphalt and boardwalk. If it happens to be that this can be meandered in such a way to reduce the amount of boardwalk and increase, say, asphalt trail, that would either maybe not necessarily lower the cost, but the less boardwalk, the more linear footage we could put in because more of it would be asphalt. True?
Yeah, that's correct. What we've done so far is we've identified areas that absolutely require boardwalk where we're crossing wetlands or bad soils. We've used the boardwalk cost for the overlook area, and then the balance of it we've tried to balance it between asphalt and boardwalk, estimating what we're going to do, and then when we actually get to design and we survey the area, we'll lay it all out and get a much better estimate.
Okay. And then there was a question asked about bikes and rollerblades. This path would be open. I mean, wouldn't be prohibited for bicycles or rollerblades. Is that true?
Well, certainly that'd be something that the township, as the owners, could create trail rules. But in terms of the design, bikes certainly would be okay and appropriate on the asphalt and boardwalk segments. Rollerblades would be a little bit challenging on the boardwalk segments.
Sure. And I know that when we've worked on other path projects in the township, I want to say the AASHTO standard is 10 feet plus an additional 2 feet of clearance on each side. If this is by its design a boardwalk and a nature boardwalk as such, I mean, we don't want to go through clear cutting. Do we have some leeway in saying that, you know, because I think the proposal is 8 feet, does that 8 feet doesn't automatically require that bikes can't enter the pathway? Is that true? I mean, in other words, the width kind of dictates, you know, sidewalk technically, well, you got two people on a bicycle, it could be kind of hazardous. It doesn't prevent people from using bicycles on sidewalks.
That's true.
Right? But I mean, if this is 8 feet, being that it isn't 10, that doesn't mean you can't take bicycles on it.
That's correct.
Okay.
Are there any provisions for bike racks or anything? In case somebody wants to lock their bike up and walk the path? Because so many people are going to be on their...
Not in this cost estimate, but that's something we certainly can add to it and keep within the 400,000.
Okay. I'm just thinking,
Total
so many
project
people
cost.
are on the path with bikes that they may want to just park it and walk through there. You know,
Sure.
and, I have a question too. Don't we have some sort of an agreement with the Huron-Clinton Metro Park Authority about,
Maintenance?
no, about roads bisecting 16 Mile Road?
Right, so we'll say, I don't know that it, I think what you're referring to is limited amount of curb cuts.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of discussion that we could probably have on that. What we'll say is that actually the Metro Parkway, I was told it runs all the way out to Van Dyke. I don't know if it was Mr. Newmer that had told me that, but there's different issues about, you know, about that. And ultimately, I believe it's owned by HCMA, but they do have an agreement with the county's Department of Roads as far as maintenance and so on and so forth. But suffice it to say that it isn't easy to get a curb cut or basically an access point to the road. Not to say it's impossible, but if you were to say, well, hey, we'd like to put a road in the middle of this, there's a combination of things I think that would go into getting that permission. Certainly beyond our scope. But the idea is that it is a limited
Yeah.
access point. So,
And there are also pedal patrols that the sheriff department provides, I know, on the existing path, and for them to go through that trail wouldn't be a stretch to go. I don't know what the frequency is, I can't say it's all the time, but I do see them out there.
sure. All right, well, I know that this process involves the public hearing, and then ultimately, the agenda has a point on here for adoption of a resolution. Well, I did close public comment, but we've ultimately kind of had a pretty, liberal or open discussion. I think before I would close the public hearing, I would call any last time if there are any public comments.
Just on this issue or?
No, just specific to this issue, yep. At the end of the meeting, or at each item, you can comment on each item once a motion's made, and then at the end of the meeting, we allow for general comments on any subject.
Can I make one more comment?
Sure.
Yeah, I see the Macomb County Sheriffs out on the trail all the time. And I just want to reiterate, the more people that you have residents on this trail, the more eyes and ears you have for safety. And I think, and also, I want to stress, putting a road through here, I'm totally against, because that would pillage this land and the natural aesthetics of this land. I would in no way put a road through there. And when they maintain this, this drain, they got little gators with their tools and so forth. They can work off with their gators and so forth to maintain that line. So I don't see any reason to put a road through there at all. And also, the sheriffs are on bikes. I see them all the time out there, a lot of them, and they're always driving around. Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Our fire department will have a hard time getting in there too. They do drive on the bike path. The bike path is all asphalt. It's not real good for putting that much weight on there, and our maintenance guys go and empty the trash cans with a pickup truck. You're not gonna drive any kind of a vehicle on a boardwalk. So if someone happens to need EMS rescue and they're 1,000 feet off of the, halfway up this path that's 2,000 feet long, they're gonna have to roll them out with something they're gonna have to buy. And it's gonna take some time to get back there and get to them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, my name is Chuck Elliott. I live at the 35922 Jefferson Avenue. I want to talk about the boardwalk there. I've seen a lot of people walking their dogs off leash and not picking up dog poo-poo, and also the sidewalk path needs to be resurfaced, because there's a lot of bumps in it and stuff, and I'd like to know if we can get that all set up. Thanks.
Thank you. So, before responding to the residents' question, at this point, I think we'd be looking to close the public hearing.
Make a motion to close the public hearing. Support.
All right. Got a motion by Mr. York with support by Mr. Tominello to close our public hearing, about 7:37 or so. Discussion, board members? Hearing none and seeing no public comment, Mr. Witt?
Yes, Mr. York,
Yes.
Mr. Tominello,
Yes.
Mr. Brado,
Yes.
Mr. Capral,
Yes.
Mr. Swakowski,
Yes.
Mr. Witt, yes, Mr. Verkest.
Yes. All right, so we've opened the public hearing regarding this resolution. We've heard public comments, we've closed that. Responding to the residents' question, a matter of fact, I believe it is the requirement to have your dog, in a public environment on a leash. That is a requirement. Now, some folks may take license with that, and that's ultimately a violation. It's a function of enforcement. As far as resurfacing, I may have misunderstood, but I think you'd mentioned the spillway path, that it was uneven. That spillway path, we're hoping that we're going to be able to get some resurfacing as a part of a future project that's being pursued by the Department of Public Works. The spillway cutoff canal is under a process of development and consideration for grant monies to enhance some of the wildlife viewing opportunities, maybe some fishing opportunities, and they're also looking to add some paths and refurbish the paths that are in there. So before we invest in those paths, some of the work that they intend to do, actually changing up to and including changing the slope of the land, the shoreline of the spillway path, they're hopeful to actually make along the spillway some floodplains that would allow for, right now I know it's off topic, but right now the banks of the spillway are pitched in such a way that it functions well as a canal to allow for the overflow of drain water coming from the Clinton River floodplain. What it doesn't allow for is a lot of places where there's floodplain, where there's, emergent wet and dry land for certain, types of wildlife. So the plan that they have is to increase that by kind of resculpting the banks as a cross-section. When they would do that, we know that they're likely to destroy some of the paths that we have, so we're hesitant at this point, knowing that another agency is looking to improve it. We're hesitant to spend money on fixing the path, only to find out that someone plows over it with a bulldozer a year from now, so. But it's a valid point. There's some sections that are in poor shape. All right, well, we've heard public comments. We've opened and closed the public hearing. It would appear, based on this process, we've heard from the board and from the public that the next item of business would be B3, and that would be possibly to adopt the resolution. Oh, I'm sorry. Misplaced it here. There is that agenda item.
It's
Right
just
here.
behind you.
Right here, I had it inside out. To adopt the resolution for the Michigan Natural Resources Trust Fund for the grant application for the Harrison Township Nature Trail. If there's a motion, I'd be interested in hearing a motion.
I'll make a motion to adopt the resolution for the Michigan Natural Resource Trust Fund for the grant application for the Harrison Township Nature Trail.
Support.
All right, we've got a motion by Mr. Witt with support by Mr. Brado to adopt the resolution for the MDNRTF Trust Fund for the grant application for this nature trail. And again, I think it's worth reminding the board and the residents, Mr. Newmer, please confirm this. At this point, adopting the resolution still does not bind us to accept the grant. True?
That is correct.
Right, so ultimately, if we find word of this and the funding happens to come up, as you mentioned, in 2015, and for whatever reason, we have a different idea in mind or a different financial position, we at any time have the right to just deny a successful grant.
That's correct.
Okay. All right, is there any more discussion? Hearing none and seeing no public comment, Mr. Witt, will you please take the roll call?
Yes, Mr. Witt, yes. Mr. Brado,
Yes.
Mr. Capral,
Yes.
Mr. Swikowski.
Yes.
Mr. Tominello.
Yes.
Mr. York,
Yes.
Mr. Verkast.
Yes.
Thank you, board.
All right, thank you. Okay, next on our agenda is item C, regarding a resolution for the charitable gaming license for the Lance Cruise Athletic Boosters. Mr. Witt?
Yes, we've received a request from Mr. McKinney, the president of the Lance Cruise Athletic Boosters. He's requesting a resolution acknowledging they're a nonprofit organization operating within the township. I think we're all familiar with the athletic boosters, but their primary purpose is for charitable gaming is to support the Lancers and augment the high school's athletic budget by supplying the teams and sports with items that they otherwise would not be able to fund for. If the board adopts the resolution, it'll be forwarded on to the boosters, who will then apply for their charitable gaming license. This is necessary for them to be able to receive a charitable gaming license.
And I know that the state, when they receive requests to acknowledge a group as a charitable organization, they ultimately are deferring to the local bodies of government to say, for example, if someone comes forward and they're claiming that they do many great things in the community, the state's in no position to know all the activities of every charitable group in every community. So they defer to the local units of government to say, is this, for example, in fact, a legitimate booster organization? And certainly, I think many folks in our community are aware of this and would say they do a lot of good things. I mean, the actions they take ultimately mean that our costs of sending our kids to school and being involved in athletics are reduced in many cases. So we'd be looking for a motion to adopt this resolution.
I do have a question, just
yeah.
for maybe Adam.
Sure.
What is they said that they have a bingo license, but they want a big bingo license. Just out of curiosity, what's a big bingo license? They say they need this for a big, it doesn't matter, I can find out later.
I want to
Thought
say
maybe
I
you
want
know.
to say it's a
an
dollar
additional-
amount.
Okay,
It is.
I didn't
Yeah.
know, I missed where,
Yeah.
where it was a big bingo license.
Yeah, they
I-
have a charitable gaming license, but they're applying for the large bingo license, which
Right.
increases the size of.
Yep, but I can clarify.
Oh, you're
because
an
I-
expert.
Yep, well, I don't know about that, but yeah. I don't know that it's so much the scale. What happens is the state has had in place, I think the Traxler Bingo Act goes back to something like 1973 or something. It goes back quite a distance. And there was a time when they had a different process for acknowledging and granting licenses. So what's happened with the athletic boosters is they've run a bingo for many years. I know currently they're off of Gratiot. And another slot came available. So instead of just renewing their license, they applied for a second bingo license. When the state reviewed this new request, they said, from time to time, especially an organization that's probably been around as long as the act was available, we ask for you guys to recertify. So go through the whole process as if you're a new organization, almost kind of a renewal of the state's acknowledgement that you're legitimate. So having the license allows you to have bingo for more than one day. But when they asked for the second day, the state said, hey, while you're at it, just prove to us that you're a legitimate charity. So it isn't anything different than what they
Oh,
had.
no,
It's
I'm
almost
fine. I
like- yeah.
just wanted to ask what,
Yeah, I suspect that someday, probably every charity, when the state looks back in their records and says, well, we haven't certified this charity or kind of verified it in the last, 20 years, we better ask these people. So when you ask them for a license, they say, before we'll give it to you, prove to us that you're legitimate.
I know that I voted on this before at some point in the last 10 years.
Well, the one you
Wasn't
voted on
it-
previous, I think, was Quarterback Club.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we've done a couple of them. Not
Oh,
the
this
high
is
school's
different.
been.
Oh,
Yep.
The athletic boosters been years. They've
And that's
had
the point.
license.
Yeah, it goes back so far that the state kind of looks into records and says, we don't have anything on this, so let's renew it. So,
I'll make a motion to adopt the resolution that the Lance Cruise Athletic Boosters, Harrison Township, County Macomb, recognizing that they are a nonprofit organization operating in Harrison Township, and that the state consider for approval for charitable gaming licenses.
all right. Got a motion by Mr. York,
Support.
support by Mr. Caprell. Sounds like it was written by John Travolta there. Discussion, board members? Hearing none and seeing no public comment, Mr. Witt, will you please take a roll call vote?
Yes, Mr. York,
Yes.
Mr. Caprell,
Yes.
Mr. Brado,
Yes.
Mr. Soikowski.
Yes.
Mr. Tominella.
Yes.
Mr. Witt, yes. Mr. Verkust.
Yes.
Resolution's adopted.
Excellent. Next on our agenda is item D1 regarding the Retiree Health Care Trust, or OPEB, other post-employment benefits. Board members, Mr. Spencer has reported that we ended 2013 with a deficit in the general fund that roughly equaled the payment that we made for the Parkway parcel. The Parkway parcel was financed using fund balance, so at the time when this board, and ultimately prior members, but this board made the decision to purchase the Parkway parcel, they decided to finance it over a period of several years using the fund balance. So if we take last year's deficit and remove from that deficit the payments made on the Parkway parcel, the general fund finished 2013 at approximately a break-even point. During the preparation of the 2013 budget, we eliminated the funding for retiree health care, even though we have been able to contribute an amount equal to 10% of wages in the past 2 years. I asked Mr. Spencer to tabulate 2013 wages for all non-fire employees. The figure for wages was approximately $1.9 million. We have a trust fund for these funds currently. They've been invested in similar to the way our pension funds are. And again, kind of as a reference point or as an explanation for board members, but also residents. In essence, today, and for several years in the past, we've said that some employees, when they retire, if they reach full and normal retirement, they'll receive retiree health care. While we've looked at a process of changing that for new hires, we still have a number of current employees and retirees that receive that benefit. In past years, that was paid for just as an additional line item expense, but certainly it's prudent if you're offering a benefit that's going to be payable in 20 years to set some dollars aside today, so when that time comes, you're not scrambling for the funds. You can use a bank of funds available to provide that benefit. Once we establish a trust, similar to the way we do a pension, those dollars can be invested in a more aggressive format as opposed to just general fund dollars, which are required to be invested in an extremely conservative format that practically generates nothing.
Not at this point.
Right.
Once interest rates go up, which they're gonna, apparently in the next 6 months, will start generating money, but
Right,
Go
yeah.
ahead.
And for the last, I don't know how many years, I mean, interest rates on our general fund dollars have just, not due to anyone's fault, it's just interest rates are low. But the monies that we've invested, prior to this year, and I think going back to, I want to say at least '07, '05, the prior boards have put dollars aside. Those funds generated 12.4% over calendar year 2013. So bottom line, we've got a liability moving forward. Right now, we've got, or I should say at the end of 2013, we have about $2.8 million in the general fund. And in the past years, we've been able to allocate 10% of wages to be placed in the retiree healthcare trust. So really, this is not a question of saying we have a surplus of $194,000, but rather to say that we have a liability that we've that we and prior boards have obligated ourselves to fund retiree health care. We've been able to contribute to that fund in past years, and we know that any dollars that are in that fund generate a substantial amount more in interest than they do just from sitting in the general fund. So although in past years we had dealt with a surplus in the general fund, this year we've basically been break even. But I wanted to give this board the opportunity to consider placing some funds in the retiree healthcare trust.
And if can I ask a question?
Sure.
Even if we put this money in there and all the money we already have in there, let's say in 2 years, for some reason we have a problem in our general fund, and we could then go and tap this fund immediately to pay for those healthcare costs that we're currently paying out of our day-to-day budget. So it's not like it's locked away for 50 years. We could tap it for that purpose.
Correct.
If we needed to.
Right. So
We're just sort of setting it aside, so we're putting it in an investment account so that we can earn a little better interest on money that we're gonna have to spend for this purpose, one way or the other.
Right. So, and I don't have the budget in front of me, but let's just say that within the general and water and sewer fund, it's important to note, I'm specifically not referring to fire in this case because these funds are separated. So, and we know we have a deficit in the fire department fund. So specific to general employees and water and sewer employees, let's say that we have, 30 retirees, and their retiree health care costs an average of $10,000. So we are literally paying out $300,000 from within our budget to pay for that retiree health care. The intent of this healthcare trust is to grow it to the size that it can provide that benefit, and we don't have to budget $300,000 a year to pay for retiree health care, but rather we have this corpus of money generating interest and maintaining that obligation. And what Mr. Witt is just saying is if next year, if we find that we're $300,000 short, right now we've budgeted $300,000 to come out of our general fund balance to pay for those retirees. We can always use these dollars to pay today's health care costs for our current retirees. So the money can't be used in other fashion, but for example, you get this to $3 million, you make 10% on the money, it's going to generate $300,000 a year, which is, covering some of those costs. So we always have those dollars available to tap in the future to pay for our current retirees if necessary. But we're never going to build that to the point that we need to if we don't, take the time to set some dollars aside and invest in that future annually.
I do have a question.
Mm-hmm.
It looks like, just reading this, that are we allocating 120, roughly, all right, just roughly based on the wages, $124,000 from the general fund and roughly 60,
Call it 70.
what is it, 70,000? Is that what we're doing here?
Yep, because it's
Because the
separate.
enterprise fund, that's what I was asking.
Exactly. Initially, when this was set up, it was general and fire, And since then, it's been split into three: general, water, and sewer, and fire.
Well, right, because the water being an enterprise fund.
Correct.
Pays for itself, and the general fund is never used to pay for water sewer, and water sewer
Correct.
doesn't pay for the general fund either, so.
Right, this would ultimately be about a $70,000 cost to water and sewer, and $124,000 from the general fund, from basically our savings or general fund.
I just wanted,
balance.
because it just says 194, I didn't know.
Yep, I said funding source, general and water sewer funds, but you're right, it is split up.
Yeah, and the thing, it didn't really say.
Yep.
Water sewer is more of a general fund discussion. so
Yep,
That's why I asked.
absolutely.
Chairman,
Yep,
I believe that if we were to go through, we'd find out that we are grossly underfunded
correct.
in their, medical, and it's, like you said, it's prudent at least to make a contribution before we get too far behind.
Right.
So,
And it's important to note, though, that I don't remember if it's every 2 or 3 years, Mr. Spencer knows best, but
Sure.
Once you establish an OPEB account or, retiree healthcare, trust, you do have to have an actuarial study
Sure.
every second or third year. I know we had one recently. But as we increase that funding, as we contribute to that, and as we tell our actuary that we just hired 3 new employees and they'll never qualify for retiree health care, that obligation shrinks, because just like a pension, it's assumed that there'll be an endless stream of people tapping into this account. So that gap, that shortfall, narrows 2 ways. One is by not making anyone else qualified for it, and the other is to fund it. But without both parts, you don't close the gap. So is there a
Make
motion?
a motion to allocate 194,000 from the general and water/sewer funds to the retiree healthcare trust. Approximately 124 from general and approximately 70,000 from
Yep.
water sewer based on wages.
Yeah, we'll say 124K or 124,000 and
I said
70,000.
approximately just because it's. gonna
Well,
come-
but we want to give, I'm sorry, and I know it was your motion, but this was approximately 10%, but the percent I would call approximate. If we want to call it 124 and 70, we would name it that. I think that would be the more appropriate motion.
I just
That way we
wanted to
give
make a
them-
motion so they know this is what we're intending.
Sure,
Does that
I'll
sound
support
good?
that.
all right. And I was just saying, for clarification purposes, when we asked Mr. Spencer to do this transfer, I think it's best if we instead of saying approximately, if we say 124 from general and
It's probably a few
70,000
dollars
from.
either way.
Yeah.
No big deal.
Right. All right, we've got a motion with support. Discussion, board members? Hearing none and seeing no public comment, we have a motion by Mr. York with support by Mr. Switkowski to allocate $194,000 from the general and water sewer funds to the retiree health care trust with a breakdown of $124,000 from general and $70,000 from water and sewer, right? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, board. All right, next on our agenda is item D2. Board members, at our March 10th regular board meeting, our last board meeting, we approved the 2014 GELC supervisory contract. One part of the new contract was to create a new position, the Engineering Services Director. Another part of the contract in negotiations was its short duration through the end of this year, roughly 9 months. This was agreed upon in order to give a sunset provision to this management structure change. David Axtell has been our water and sewer superintendent for over 2 years. During that time, he's made several improvements in the department. I believe Mr. Axtell is an excellent candidate for the position of Engineering Services Director. He's demonstrated strong leadership capabilities and made changes which have improved morale and workflow. In the event that this change in position does not result in an improvement, the level 1 salary that is proposed here will be lower than the level 4 salary for the water and sewer superintendent. So the proposal as it stands is to promote Mr. Axtell the position of Engineering Services Director effective 4/3/14, which is the start of the next payroll period. Discussion or a motion, board members?
Well, I guess I have some discussion.
Okay?
As well, we know at the last board meeting, we discussed the building official and ordinance or really just the building position, and we got into quite a heated argument over that. I won't revisit that again. But what I will say is, this particular item, and I like Mr. Axtell. I think Mr. Axtell's a great guy. I think that Mr. Axtell does a great job as the water sewer superintendent. With that said, I don't think the water sewer superintendent that is busy, very, very busy with the outside work has time and or the workflow to handle just the building clerical. Your workflow, it just doesn't work. And I spent a lot of time thinking about this after our last meeting. What is our building official going to do? I just brought up just a couple of items to illustrate that. Planning and zoning. Is that our building official or is that under Mr. Axtell? The building official will be over the inspectors. Mr. Axtell's over the building official. Then you have Andrew, and then Ken. The building inspectors have essentially 4 supervisors. Where's the continuity in that? The reason that you have a water sewer superintendent to handle the water sewer is the clerical is there to support the water sewer department and everything that happens there. The clerical for the building department is there to support the building issues, building permits, planning, zoning, ordinance. All of those items flow through the building. The building director or building official, and I don't see how having the building official go to the water sewer superintendent or the engineering services director. I won't use names. I'll just say engineering services directors because there's nothing personal in this at all. Why he has to go to him to have the building clerical, maybe do, building permits or maybe write a letter to, a developer, whatever those issues might be. That seems ridiculous to me. It would be like in my office, I directly supervise the employees, but instead of, I need somebody to do tax tribunals. Well, I have to go to Dave and say, Dave, Mr. Brado, you need to have my clerical do this job for me because I'm not over them and I don't get paid to be over them. That's one of the issues. I will also say that while this job is $82,000 right now, in 4 years, this job balloons to $95,000. For $95,000, if this is what we want to do, we can just go to a city manager for $95,000 and let them run the whole boat. Not only the building, but water, sewer, and over the treasurer's office, and over the clerk's office, and over everybody. If that's what we truly want to do. Because I'm sure we can get a really, really well-qualified candidate for $95,000 to take over the whole shooting match here. Third item. While it's purported to be a cost-neutral item, when you look at it a little closer, it's not. This is going to be a direct hit to the general fund, which is already in a precarious situation, because that salary will be split evenly between the water sewer department fund and the building department fund. Now, taking the $20,000 off the, and I'm just going off the $95,000 because that's what it eventually is. You're looking at about a $40,000 hit to the general fund that we don't have budgeted for currently. I mean, that has to be brought into this. Normally, when we do these wages because of our pension contributions, normally it's about a 50% add-on to the wage. So you're looking at a full boat of about, what, $140,000 for that position, split evenly, 70,000 to water sewer, 70,000 to building or general fund, which, by the way, the building fund, we all know, is supposed to be self-supportive. That's got a $200,000 deficit every year. So now we're gonna go up to, what, 240, 250 on the deficit on that building side. Went over the workflow issues. Another issue, who handles building permit problems? Is that gonna be Dave or the engineering services director? Or will that be the building official? I don't know the answer to that. So if a citizen comes in, has a problem, the building official says, no, you can't have a permit, do they then go to the engineering services director? And then from there, they go to Andrew, or the deputy supervisor, then the supervisor? I don't understand how that, if Dave is over the building official, or quite how that mix is gonna occur. You know, in order to do this, because like I mentioned, the time, I think everybody would be in agreement, you know, that the water sewer department does take up 100% of the current water sewer superintendent's time. We're actually promoting, well, we're gonna promote somebody that's already been doing the job, but we're actually promoting a third individual to free up the time for the water sewer superintendent to now become the engineering services directors. Once again, cannot be a revenue neutral situation. And the last item that I would like to talk about is it says here that the negotiations was in short duration through the end of this year, roughly 9 months. This was agreed upon in order to give a sunset provision. Now, while I understand that that is a sort of a meeting of the minds, and we probably would all agree that it was somewhat said that way, this contract here does not say specifically that this promotion has a sunset period, and then the two people that we promoted, especially that the next person in item D4, the water sewer foreman, if at the end of this 6 months or 9 months, if we decide this doesn't work, I think it's already understood that everybody would move back into their previous positions. So you're gonna move a gentleman that from the water sewer foreman back into the ASME union. That being said, these are contracts. We don't deal in verbal orders or this is what we think. We deal with it when it's in black and white. And I full well understand it doesn't matter what I say or any of these items. We've already been through them, I think, twice. I get that this board is going to vote for this, and it's probably going to be a 6-1 vote. Do it the right way with a letter of agreement with the union. So if in fact December 31st or January 1st, if this doesn't work out, everybody knows where you're at. That the water sewer and the engineering services director, he will be automatically go back to his previous job as the water sewer director, and the water sewer foreman in item D4 will know, and it's agreed upon with the union, that that job might go away back to a regular water sewer job. And like I said, I don't know how it's all gonna work. It might work out, it might not, but at least do the right thing and just put it in writing, get everybody to sign off on it. So at the end of the day, if we decide to move, we don't face a grievance, legal bills, because what we do know from past experience, that the three people can certainly grieve us, and we will end up redlining these positions at 95,000 and 85,000 or whatever these jobs are. And we will lose that all day long. We just can't say January 1st, oh, we're gonna get rid of the engineering service director job, and we're gonna get rid of the water sewer foreman, because these jobs are in the contract.
Okay, well, quite a bit of information there. I'm gonna do the best that I can to try to answer. You did ask several questions. One of the points that you made was that you couldn't see how our water and sewer superintendent, who's busy with outside work, could take on additional tasks. And from the negotiations, what we discussed is by the addition of transferring one person from the ASME field force to making them a working foreman, that puts another person in the field that can also provide management and leadership on job sites. That being one of the steps in this whole process that would free up the prior water and sewer superintendent to take on the engineering services director position. The first point you asked is, will the building official go to the engineering director to get a letter typed? Simply stated, no. I don't think that isn't how it works amongst any department that I know of, that somehow we say, well, the only way I can go and talk to someone else in my department to get a task done is to go to the supervisor. As an example, you said, well, will an inspector have 4 supervisors, meaning the building official, the engineering services director, the deputy supervisor, and the supervisor? If that were the case, actually what you're implying they'd have to do is the building official, to get a letter typed, would have to go to the engineering services director. The engineering services director would then contact the deputy supervisor, who would then pass the word on to me. Then I would tell the deputy supervisor to tell the engineering services director to tell the building official that they in fact can have someone type a letter. That's just ridiculous. And no, the answer is that's not how it would work. I think we all have a pretty good understanding of how people interact in a workplace, and so the answer to that would be no. Another question you had was that this position will become $95,000 in 4 years. And then you said it's going to be a direct hit to the general fund because it will be split 50-50. There's nothing in here that says that how we need to divide up or split up the services of any individual. In fact, I think this can be a cost-neutral proposal, because if we had allotted a certain set of funds for a building official in the past, we're allotting less funds now. 50% of the engineering service director's time is not likely to be spent overseeing the building department, and therefore there's nothing that says we have to allot 50% of his expenses to the building fund and therefore the general fund. We as a board make that budget, and we can ultimately, within a certain amount of reason, divide up those expenses however it is that we want. I think you're a little high on the $200,000 deficit in the building department, but I'll certainly agree that since building has slowed, I think we all understand that the building department has not run even or balanced. The revenue is not able to keep up. Certainly not unique to Harrison Township. I think it's worth noting we've eliminated 2 inspector positions, replaced them with part-time. We've got only 1 full-time inspector position, and certainly have tried to make changes to the cost structure, but this absolutely can be cost neutral. Building permit problems, that's a great question. Who will handle it? Currently, or I should say under our current structure, obviously currently we don't have a building official, but under
Let's
our...
assume we do.
Right. Under our current structure, if that building official is in the field, which our prior building official was in the field, I'd guess 50% of the time, there was no one available to handle those issues or any other issues that would require management personnel in that department. With this structure, we ultimately have 2 people that can handle that issue, and if one of them happens to be in the field, the other one should be able to adjust their work schedule so that one person's always in place to deal with those problems. Currently, right now, it's Andrew or me that are handling those issues. So I think this, you brought up a great point. I think this change in structure allows for potentially 4 people, Andrew, myself, the building official, and the engineering services director. So I think that's an improvement. You said that the promotion of the 3rd person cannot be cost neutral. Well, I would beg to differ. What we basically did when we went through negotiations, and Mr. Swakowski was also a part of that, was we looked at what we're spending now, and we looked at how could we divide those up to satisfy the union's request for some things and our need for some things. This process of taking someone from one union to the second union doesn't result in the person in the AFSCME union being replaced. Right now, we have 8 AFSCME personnel, and we have 2 water and sewer personnel that are in this management structure. When we're done, we're gonna have 7 folks and 2 folks and a third guy whose time is split between 2 departments. So I would see that, again, as cost neutral. And then finally, you asked about the sunset provision. It's not stated in the contract. And it's important that we avoid verbal orders. I absolutely agree. I think an important part of all of this, though, is the fact that as management, and it's pretty clearly stated in the contract, we have the right to employ and lay off people. So what would this look like if we wanted to go back? We would use existing sections and articles in the contract that give us the ability to lay off and eliminate a position and create another position. So let's just say that we wanted to return to this. What if we follow through with this and 8 months from now we decide that it doesn't work? What would we do? Well, we're going to lay off an engineering services director and eliminate that position. But we're going to post for a water and sewer superintendent. And I think I got an idea who might apply for that position. We would eliminate the foreman position, but we would have an opening in AFSCME and look to hire in that department. And there's nothing saying that if I've got someone going from salary to hourly, they don't carry with that some benefits because they were in one bargaining unit that they get to carry anything over to another bargaining unit. It's only within the bargaining unit that they maintain those rights. So we already have articles in place that allow all this. And the last part of this request explains that it's important to understand Mr. Axtell, who's proposed for this position, is at level 2. If we do nothing, he's scheduled to go to level 3 per the, pending board approval. Ultimately, I think it would be due this month. If this doesn't work, come next spring, he's going to be level 4. The cost that I'm proposing for level 1 in this position is less than what level 4 is. So it doesn't advance him in his salary schedule any faster. If it doesn't work, we can decide whatever we want to do in the building department, but we can return all of this with the current articles. I can't tell you that they won't grieve it. We certainly sat around and agreed to this, but I don't know why they would agree us using the articles that already exist for layoff, recall, and elimination of positions.
I just, if there's a meeting of the minds, why don't we just do a letter of agreement with them?
Mr. Chairman,
And-
if I may, Darren, at the close of the meeting, that was discussed. And it was brought up, and I think Mr. Axtell was at that meeting, and it was basically up to them, up to Mr. Kaluza, because there was a question of that they were going to draw up language for us with a letter of agreement of how that would transpire.
I just
Right.
don't want to get into an
I
unfair labor
understand what you're
practice.
saying,
I mean,
but
when you start getting
that
into this,
isn't here,
we'll
but
just
yet it's
eliminate
supposed to
this
be.
job and then we're going to post this job. That sounds an awful lot like unfair labor practices and lawyer bills and
No.
and
The article allows us to lay off and hire. I mean, I understand what you're saying, but we maintain those. It isn't us that needs a letter of agreement. We maintain those rights. It's ultimately if GELC wishes to have a letter of agreement, but I'm not in need of that letter of agreement.
I am. I think it's just the responsible thing to do as a board to just put it in writing, everybody sign off on it and move forward.
And-
Mr. Supervisor, are you taking one employee out of one particular union and moving them into another?
Not
Not
yet,
at this point, no.
but that is a
This
part of
will
this
make
change.
it
All
that way.
internal.
Right. But I want to make sure you understand, let's back up a step. The fourth item that's listed here is to propose a position. And initially, we would look to promote from within. If there is a member of our AFSCME union that wants to apply for this, then we'll certainly consider them. If there is no one internally, then we would have to advertise on the outside. But at this point,
Right,
that
for
would be a
T4,
volunteer.
But you're
Right.
still moving one person from one union to another union?
Not with this proposal, no.
Oh, not with any of these three?
Yes, we are. We can sit here, look, we had a closed session, we can sit here and say whatever we want to say about this posting and this and that, but I will assure you that there's a name that everybody knows. This contract was negotiated for that person for that former position. And let's not kid ourselves, we all know the name that's going to come forward after that posting. So it will be an internal person, 100%. And it will be somebody going from the ASME union into the supervisory union.
But that's not
But
at
that's in
this
the
meeting.
future.
That's not at this meeting. That's
That's
during the
correct,
should it
but,
happen.
but my point being that I don't understand why it's so hard to just do a letter of agreement like Jack's saying and just put it all in writing. So if we decide not to do it, we don't have to worry about ULPs. We don't have to worry about, somebody saying, oh, I didn't know I might be put back. It just makes sense to do it that way, to not do a misstep and fall down later and end up having to pay people a lot of money that we don't want to.
Right.
Well, I'm,
Yep.
I can't speak on behalf of Mr. Huth and what happened in that session because I wasn't part of it, but that might be a good idea just to get his opinion on it. And if it's something that's already a general understanding between the union and the township, it can't hurt. But should check with him.
Right.
Yeah,
It
well, what we
definitely should not.
discussed, and
To prevent
Mr. Burkett said, basically was true, yes. That for us, we had, as far as management,
I
didn't
know
need it.
that's standard
And
language
then-
that you
and then
can do that,
we
but-
told then their business agent, Mr. Kaluza, provide us language.
That would
If
be a
you
good
wanna-
idea.
If you want a memo of agreement, provide us with a letter that we could review.
Right. The point being, though, that throughout this process, when I agree to say this is what'll happen, I'm sacrificing rights. There's no reason for me to say this is exactly what will happen. Articles exist that say what rights I have. That doesn't mean somebody can't grieve them, but they can grieve a letter of agreement. I mean, what this comes down to is a clear understanding between two parties with language that supports all the steps that are in place. We have language that says we can lay off and hire. We already have that. Signing a letter of agreement saying that if this doesn't work, I'm going to lay this person off and hire that person in this position, it's redundant. Our point in that process was if the union wishes to have that document because they don't believe that we're sincere in what we say we'll do, they can ask for that. But I don't have a need to say that I can lay this person off and eliminate that job position and create another position. And there's also language that says if I pay somebody $90,000, I can't say to them, well, now I want you to sit in this chair and get $85,000. That's why we took the time to structure the salary schedule the way we did. There's fingerprints throughout this whole process that says what our intent was. And as well as correspondence with the other bargaining unit so that they're informed, so that there are no surprises.
Well, the only person that's going to benefit are the people in the union. Why would they supply a document? This goes back to when we were doing the layoff and all of that to put somebody into my office. We went through all that. But if you remember, we could do all that because it was the same salary level and it was a lateral move. In this case, while I understand everything you're saying, and I full well believe we have those rights, and I've always believed we had those rights, the simple fact of the matter is there's not an arbitrator that we will go to that will say, you just eliminate this guy's job. That's a job in the contract. It doesn't say that this job will end December 31st, for example. This is a negotiated job. It's now in the contract as a negotiated contract, as a job.
So under your understanding of a labor agreement, we cannot lay anybody off.
No, that's not what I said.
That sounds like that's what you're saying.
What you can't do is just say, oh, I'm putting this person in this job as the engineering service director, and I don't like that position.
So I'm gonna lay it off.
So you know what? You're not laying it off.
Yes, you
though.
are, Darren.
You're getting
That's
rid of
the
it.
terminology. If you don't understand that, that's your fault.
Adam, and you do understand what a red line is too, right?
And if you
Okay,
listen
and
to
what
what
we're
Mr.
arguing-
Hold on a second. If you listen to what Mr. Verkes said, the way this contract was negotiated, I think you were in on the team, but I'm not sure. This salary falls in between the two steps where this individual would be. So he's not going to be stuck at a higher rate than what the salary structure already exists. So I can't help it if you don't understand the way layoffs work. But the contract allows us to do
Adam, I
layoffs.
do understand the way layoffs work, and I certainly understand.
You're not demonstrating that
I
tonight.
certainly understand how the grievance process works, and at the same time, we just lost a grievance, giving people 13 years of seniority because somebody couldn't sign a grievance denied document. So when I talk about crossing T's and dotting I's, that's what we need to do around here from now on.
So how does a letter of agreement
It's not
prevent
in
that?
the contract. it's not in the contract, that you have a sunset provision. That's all that I'm saying. You have a meeting of the minds, put it in there. And it's sounding like Mr. Swakowski and our attorney are saying, just take that extra step and just do it and be done with it. I don't even know why we're arguing about it. As managers and as you know, stewards of the community, we should be looking at reducing our risk in the future on these items. Leaving that sort of out there and saying, oh, we can just get rid of this job, that just opens yourself up for an arbitration and a lawsuit and unfair labor practice at the end of the day.
I understand, and I think where I might take exception is to use the term leaving it out there. If I have an article that says I'm gonna pay Mr. Smith $10 an hour, I don't need a letter of agreement that says I'm gonna pay him $10 an hour. The articles that exist already give us the right to lay off and fill positions as needed. I don't need a letter of agreement that says that's what I'm gonna do. When that time comes, we already have that right. No matter what agreement I sign, there's a grievance process, and I can grieve a letter of agreement just as easily as I can grieve the article about layoff. The difference is, the article on layoff is a fairly standard article throughout all these documents, but when I draft a special letter of agreement that says what I'm gonna do, I've bound myself to doing exactly whatever that says. And when someone says, well, that letter of agreement means something else to me, I can grieve that. But when I say you're laid off, that's a right that we have. An arbitrator is gonna look at the ability to lay off and recall employees separate from a letter of agreement. And I believe that the language associated with layoff and recall is a lot more powerful than having some letter of agreement that can still be grieved just as easily as any other step.
I think we should let Mr. Huth.
Mr. Chairman, one way or the other, by board action, last meeting, we approved the collective bargaining agreement.
Correct.
And the restructuring, management, positions. I think by our action, we're bound to fill these positions.
You're never bound to fill a position. I would disagree
We're bound
there.
once we vote on this, but certainly we've
disagree.
gone through a whole
Well,
process of
I
negotiation
mean,
to try to.
whether it's a person or not,
Right.
we said when we negotiated it that this is going to be the structure of the contract, of the management structure in the building and the water. And at that point, we agreed to that.
Right,
And they agreed to it.
right.
We voted on it, they voted on it. So, while the contract isn't signed yet, I think it, stands pretty clear that, by public action, accepted that language,
Right.
the contract,
We're
Well,
only
I-
accepting
the
the,
collective bargaining agreement, and it says, part of the negotiations, because I sat through those negotiations, and that's what, that was the intent, and I agree that, Chet was supposed to, we told Chet, if he felt they needed that, give us a letter, we can look at it. I mean, I'll keep my nose out of it, and the three full-time can look at it over and see what they want to put in it.
Well, I think it's important that you say, I don't think there's a reason as a member of the negotiating committee that you have to keep your nose out of anything. I think if I might try to restate what you said, while I wouldn't say that we're bound by this, I think that if we now said, we changed our mind on the whole thing, we're only gonna hire the one guy at the lower salary, we're not gonna do anything else, and we got a contract for you that's only good for 9 months, I think I would generate some ill will with the union. So, while I wouldn't say we're bound by
Let's
it,
put
I
it
think
this
we
way, I'd
bargained
have
a
to
good.
testify for the union.
Correct, exactly. I'd be right behind you.
I
That's
sat in
my
on
whole
those
point.
negotiations, so if we took that position,
Right.
they'd
But
be
we don't have
calling
to-
me as a witness.
but my point is, we don't have to fill any of these positions. If you want to
That's
have
correct.
your building and ordinance for it, that's our right as management, as you clearly pointed out so eloquently,
absolutely.
that is management right. If we
Right.
decide that we want to keep our current system, which I think is the best system,
Right.
everybody disagrees with that, but that's fine. That's our right as management. The problem comes in when you promote people and then you want to essentially demote them
Right.
to a job that you negotiated. It seems silly that we're even having this argument.
Well, all I was trying to do was clarify that I think what Mr. Swakowski was trying to say was that we're not bound by this. But again, if I use that analogy, there's enough fingerprints in place to say through several sessions we talked about and drafted language and discussed the duration of a contract and a management structure. And this is one step of that whole process, and to determine and to vet out whether or not your estimate is right or not right. Is it better? Is it not better? We all agreed, let's put 9 months on it, we'll run it for 9 months, and we'll have a good idea. We'll know for sure at the end of that, and no one will be harmed in that process. If the union says, gee whiz, this isn't working, if the township says this isn't working, we know that we don't have to convince either party to bring an end to this. We've got contractually in place the end of this. Not only do we maintain our ability to lay off, but the contract ends. And we're in the position to say, all right, we're going to sit down. We're literally demonstrating to a group of employees, good employees, I might add. I mean, this is not a bargaining unit that brings us grievances and problems, but we're negotiating with a group of employees. We're saying to them, if this doesn't work, but we might have a third idea that isn't what used to be, and it isn't what we tried, but there's a third arrangement that we can all see now would work better. We don't have language binding us. We have the right to sit down, and both sides can sit and discuss and talk this out to find the best way of doing it. That's the whole purpose of who else would ever sign a 9-month contract? Why would you negotiate a contract for 9 months? That's all I was trying to say. I think Mr. Switkowski was trying to say our actions to date have kind of sent a pretty strong message of what our intention was, which is exactly what we discussed.
Let me say this another way.
Okay.
I don't think that the engineering services director is going to grieve us. I don't think that the next guy in D2 is going to grieve us.
Mm-hmm.
I think at the end of the day, you might end up at the end of the day getting a grievance from the water sewer foreman if you move everybody back. That's a possibility. But I'll tell you where you're going to get the grievance from. You're going to get the grievance from the building inspection director / official, because he's going to go on that job, and like you said earlier, it just seems clear that the building official would be doing that clerical. That's not his job. His job is not to run that clerical, and if he now starts finding himself doing that job, we could face a grievance from him that he is doing out of classification work, and that's where you're going to get the grievance from. I don't think it's going to come from the other people. I think
At
it's
that
going
point,
to
Darren,
come
if it doesn't work, they're going to be negotiating for that position to be upgraded.
Yeah, and if that's the grievance we get, Darren, after 9 months, then it didn't work as an experiment, and we can look at it. I'll agree with you there.
I mean,
if
I
those are
think-
the types of grievances that we're getting, I'll agree with you.
I think
I
that's
mean-
where the grievance is going to come.
I mean, we sort of have to talk about all three of these items as one.
I am.
And I mean, I could see the AFSCME person that's coming up. We could have a conversation with them just so they understand if there is an internal candidate,
Right.
then it might make sense to have that conversation because they weren't party to those negotiations.
Bingo.
So maybe it makes sense to make sure that individual who applies is clear as to what the situation is.
That's
So
where I'm.
I agree with that. I mean, that just makes sense.
Right.
And I do have just one other question.
Well, and just
Who
before
does
you
ordinance?
before you say that, you'd brought up that they might grieve. All the contract says is who has management responsibilities. So let me give you an example. Within a department, there's a various different structure, division of work, whatever it might be. I suppose, for example, someone in the building department could go into the assessing department and say, could you look up the information on X, Y, and Z? And they say, yeah, no problem. Now, if there's a disciplinary issue or a management issue, you certainly wouldn't expect a clerical person from one department to take that responsibility. We're not suggesting in any way that the building official position doesn't have the ability to interact with people in their own department. What we're saying is that we're trying to transfer the responsibility of the clerical people to a position that's designed to be present the majority of the time, which allows the building official not only to not have the responsibility of the management of an employee, but gives them additional freedom to go out in the field so that as our building demands increase, we have a building official who can also actually go out and do inspection work without leaving a department completely unattended by any management person.
I know that we disagree on that issue, but the reason that our old building official was out in the field was because currently one of our full-time building inspector is currently out.
Mhm.
You know, that's a lot of the function of him not being here was just trying to fill in a lot of that work that had to get done.
But even when that
You
building
know.
inspector was here, he was in the field quite frequently. And I think that's the whole point, because when he is in the field, there's 0 persons available to answer questions, resolve issues within departments, or an issue between 2 employees in the same department, or an issue with a resident. And that's what we're trying, that's what this experiment is about. That's what we're trying to see if we can accomplish.
I
What we're
understand.
proposing here is a 9-month experiment, and when we talk about cost neutral, we're talking about cost neutral at step 4. If we go through all the steps that we talk here in D2, D3, and D4, we're talking about promoting 1 person. We're talking about putting another person into a permanent position, and then the 3rd position is a new position from one department potentially to another. If all of those things happen, everybody is at step 1 or level 1 in the contract. From level 1 to level 4, when we get to level 4, we're cost neutral. Within, I think it was $3,000, we hung a target on it. But at level 1, this structure actually will save us money for the next 4 years. So not only are we embarking on a 9-month experiment, in the short term, and God knows we have financial needs greater in the short term than long term, in the short term, we're actually saving thousands of dollars with this structure. If it doesn't work, the worst we have to do is go back to what we had before. You'd ask a question about ordinance, so
Who's over ordinance?
well, prior to our building official leaving, clearly the contract says that the building official is also the ordinance enforcement officer, and it's a part of the job description. Currently, in his absence, that department falls on me. So ordinance as well as building has fallen back to me in the short term.
I'm not talking that. I'm talking after post whatever. The building inspection director / official. Is he over the ordinance department, or is the engineering service director over the ordinance department?
Yeah, I understood that to be,
I mean, part of my problem here,
Isn't that still
part of my
under
problem is that
official?
that we're doing this by poaching $20,000 from the building official's salary, and I don't feel that you've diminished that job enough to warrant that $20,000. And I feel, and even as we're talking today and we're starting to talk through this, that the building official just naturally is gonna be doing the clerical, is gonna be doing the ordinance, is gonna be, just because that is the natural workflow of that department. And I think that's what you're gonna find, and that's why I'm saying.
what does doing the clerical mean? He's gonna be doing the clerical. I mean, he's gonna be doing the
Well,
clerical work?
Well, I think what you're gonna find is just the natural flow is, you do building permits, and then you go, could you type,
Sure.
Mr. Smith to Mrs. Smith's house, and could you go do
Absolutely.
this? But he's not over that department. That would be like me
Yeah, but you
going
don't need
into
that.
Adam's department and asking.
You
one
mean
of
to
his
tell me right now
employees-
you can't ask Marge to do something and she'd say, sorry, you have to go to Adam, I can't give you that information?
No,
If
I
you have a
didn't- no,
discipline
no,
issue in
I-
Adam's
I-
department,
I-
Adam is responsible